The dust kicked up beneath Penelope Owens's boots as she stood outside the general store in Ordway, Colorado, her heart hammering against her ribcage, while the man she was supposed to marry revealed exactly who he truly was. It was April of 1883, and the spring sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town. But the chill running through her bones had nothing to do with the weather. Through the half-open door, she could hear Walter Kemp's voice, sharp and calculating, speaking to her father in tones that made her stomach turn. "I will not sign any papers until I receive the land deed and $500, Walter was saying, his words clipped and businesslike. "Payment up front, Mr. Owens. That is my condition for marrying your daughter." Penelope pressed herself against the wooden wall, her breath catching. She had known this engagement was arranged, that her father needed Walter's connections to the railroad company, but she had told herself that perhaps affection might grow between them. She had tried to see the good in Walter during their brief, chaperoned courtship. Now, hearing him negotiate for her like she was livestock being sold at auction, any illusions she had harbored shattered like glass. "That is a steep price," her father replied, his voice weary. The land alone is worth nothing without water rights, and we both know it," Walter interrupted. "You need this marriage, Owens. Your debts are mounting and winter nearly broke you. I am offering you a solution, but I want compensation for taking on your daughter and your problems." Penelope felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. She would not give Walter Kemp the satisfaction. Her hands trembled as she gripped her skirts, wondering how her life had come to this. At 21 years old, she had hoped for something more than being bartered away to a man who saw her as a burden to be compensated for. She turned to leave, needing air, needing space, needing anything but to hear another word of that horrible conversation. As she spun around, she collided directly with a solid chest. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her, and she looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. "Easy there, miss," the man said, his voice low and warm like honey. "You all right?" He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn hat. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and a jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, dust-covered denim, a faded blue shirt, and a bandana tied loosely around his neck. Everything about him spoke of hard work and honest living, a stark contrast to Walter's pressed suits and slicked-back hair. "I am fine," Penelope said quickly, stepping back. "I apologize. I was not watching where I was going." The cowboy's eyes, sharp and observant, flicked from her face to the general store behind her, then back again. His expression shifted, concern replacing the initial surprise. "You look like you have seen a ghost. Are you certain you are all right?" Before Penelope could answer, her father's voice rose slightly from inside the store. $500 is everything I have left, Kemp. You know that. "Then I suggest you find a way to make more," Walter replied coldly, "or find another husband for your daughter, though I doubt any respectable man would take her without a proper dowry." The cowboy's jaw tightened, and Penelope watched his hands curl into fists at his sides. When he looked at her again, there was understanding in his gaze, and something else, anger on her behalf. "That your betrothed in there?" he asked quietly. Penelope nodded, unable to trust her voice. The cowboy was silent for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow did not. Then he said, his voice firm and certain, "He does not deserve you." The simple statement, delivered with such conviction from a complete stranger, broke something loose inside Penelope's chest. A sob threatened to escape, but she swallowed it down, lifting her chin with as much dignity as she could muster. "Unfortunately, what he deserves and what he gets seem to be two different things," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father needs this marriage. Our ranch is failing, and Walter has the money and connections to save it. What I want, what I deserve, does not factor into the equation." The cowboy removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "My name is Samuel Hawkins," he said, "and I have spent enough years in this world to know that no woman should be sold off like property. No matter what financial troubles her family faces, there are always other options." "Are there?" Penelope asked, and she hated how defeated she sounded. "Because from where I stand, my choices are to marry a man who sees me as a burden, or watch my father lose everything he has worked for his entire life. Watch him lose the ranch that has been in our family for 2 generations. Those are not really choices at all. Samuel replaced his hat, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes the choice is not about picking the lesser evil. Sometimes it is about finding the courage to walk a different path entirely. Easy words from someone who is not in my position, Penelope said, but there was no heat in her voice. She was too tired for anger, too heartsick for anything but honesty. You are free to go wherever you please. Do whatever you wish. I am a woman in 1883 with a failing ranch and a father who needs me to save him. Tell me, Mr. Hawkins, what different path exists for someone like me? The door to the general store opened, and Walter Kemp emerged, followed by Penelope's father. Walter was exactly as Penelope had described him, in her mind impeccably dressed, handsome in a cold way, with sharp features and calculating eyes. When he saw Penelope standing with Samuel, his expression hardened. Penelope, he said curtly. Who is this? No one, Penelope said quickly. Just someone I bumped into. I was just going. Samuel Hawkins, Samuel said, extending his hand with deliberate slowness. I am new to Ordway, looking for ranch work. Walter ignored the extended hand, his eyes narrowing. Penelope, your father and I have finished our business discussion. We will be married at the end of the month. I trust you will be prepared. It was not a question. It was not even really a statement. It was a command delivered with the expectation of complete obedience. Penelope felt Samuel stiffen beside her, felt the anger radiating off him like heat from a stove. Congratulations, Samuel said, and though his tone was polite, there was an edge to it that made Walter's eyes snap to him. Miss Owens must be very special for you to be so eager to marry her. Special is one word for it, Walter said dismissively. Necessary is perhaps more accurate. Now, if you will excuse us, we have family matters to discuss. He reached for Penelope's arm, but Samuel stepped forward, not threateningly, but enough to make Walter's hand pause in midair. The lady looks like she could use some air, Samuel said calmly. Perhaps you should give her a moment. Perhaps you should mind your own business, cowboy, Walter snapped. Penelope, come, now. Penelope's father, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. Penelope, please, we need to discuss the wedding arrangements. Penelope looked at her father, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes, the defeat in his slumped shoulders. He was a good man who had worked himself to the bone trying to keep their ranch afloat. He had raised her alone after her mother died, when Penelope was just 12. She owed him everything. But she also heard Walter's words echoing in her mind. I want compensation for taking on your daughter and your problems. I need a moment, Penelope said, her voice stronger than she felt. I will meet you at home in an hour. Penelope, her father started, but she was already walking away, her skirt swishing around her legs as she moved quickly down the dusty main street of Ordway. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without looking that it was Samuel following her, not Walter or her father. She walked until she reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The land stretched out before her, endless and beautiful, gold and green beneath the spring sky. This was what she would be losing if her father lost the ranch, not just the land itself, but the freedom it represented, the connection to her mother's memory, the life she had always known. I meant what I said, Samuel's voice came from behind her. He does not deserve you. No man who talks about a woman the way he was talking deserves to marry her. Penelope turned to face him, this stranger who had somehow seen her crisis and decided to care. You heard? Enough, Samuel admitted. I was waiting to speak to the store owner about work when I heard your betrothed negotiating your marriage like a business transaction. It made me sick to my stomach. Welcome to the reality of being a woman in the West, Penelope said bitterly. We are commodities to be traded, bargaining chips to secure deals and alliances. Walter wants the land and the water rights. My father wants the money and the railroad connections. What I want never enters the conversation. Samuel moved to stand beside her, looking out over the prairie. What do you want? The question, asked so simply and sincerely, made Penelope's throat tight with emotion. When was the last time anyone had asked her that? When had anyone cared what she wanted? I want to keep the ranch, she said honestly. I want my father to be safe and secure. I want to honor my mother's memory by preserving the land she loved. But I also want... She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the longing in her heart. You also want to be loved, Samuel finished quietly. You want to be valued for who you are, not what you can provide. You want a partner, not a business arrangement. Penelope looked at him, startled by his perception. How did you know? Because that is what everyone wants, Samuel said. And because I can see it in your eyes. You are a woman who deserves to be cherished, and instead you are being treated like livestock. It is wrong, and somewhere deep down, you know it. Knowing it is wrong and being able to change it are two very different things, Penelope said. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm afternoon. Even if I refused to marry Walter, what then? My father would lose the ranch. We would have nothing. At least this way, he is taken care of. And what about you? Samuel asked. Who takes care of you in this arrangement? Penelope had no answer for that. She had spent so many weeks telling herself that she could endure marriage to Walter, that she could find a way to make it bearable. But hearing him demand payment for the burden of marrying her had cracked the fragile shell of acceptance she had built around herself. I should go, she said finally. My father will be worried. Let me walk with you, Samuel offered. At least back to town. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the wind rustling through the grass and the distant call of a hawk. Finally, Samuel spoke again. I work for the Double Bar Ranch, about 10 miles north of here. The owner, Mr. Patterson, is a good man. He treats his workers fair, pays decent wages. I have been saving money for 3 years now, planning to buy my own place someday. I am telling you this because I want you to know I am not just some drifter with empty words. I have prospects, a future. Penelope looked at him, confused by this sudden revelation. Why are you telling me this? Samuel stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His blue eyes were serious, intense in a way that made her breath catch. Because in about 30 seconds, I am going to do something completely insane, and I want you to know I am not crazy, just decisive. I have always been a man who acts when he sees something worth fighting for. Mr. Hawkins, I do not understand. Run away with me, Samuel said. Penelope stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? I know how it sounds, Samuel continued quickly. We just met. You do not know anything about me except my name and where I work. But I know what I heard in that store, and I know what I see in front of me. I see a beautiful, strong woman being forced into a marriage that will break her spirit. I see someone who deserves so much more than being sold to the highest bidder. And I know, with every fiber of my being, that I cannot walk away and let that happen to you. You are insane, Penelope whispered, but her heart was racing, her mind spinning with the impossibility and the terrible, wonderful appeal of what he was suggesting. Maybe, Samuel agreed. But I'm also serious. Come north with me, back to the Double Bar. Mr. Patterson and his wife, they are good people. Mrs. Patterson could use help around the house, and she has been saying for months that she wants to hire another woman to help with the cooking and cleaning for the ranch hands. You would have honest work, fair pay, and your own room. You would be safe, and you would be free from Walter Kemp. And my father? Penelope asked, even as part of her desperately wanted to say yes, wanted to grab onto this lifeline this stranger was offering her. What happens to him when Walter refuses to marry me and give him the money he needs? Samuel's expression became thoughtful. Your father needs money to save the ranch, correct? What if there was another way to get it? The Double Bar is always looking for good ranch hands, especially ones with experience. If your father is willing to work, Mr. Patterson might be willing to hire him. It would not be the same as owning his own place, but it would be honest work and a roof over his head. And maybe, in time, he could save enough to start over. You do not even know if your employer would agree to any of this, Penelope pointed out, but her resistance was weakening. The thought of escaping Walter, of having a chance at a different life, was intoxicating. Then let me ride north and ask him, Samuel said. Give me 2 days. Do not marry Walter until I come back. If Mr. Patterson says no, then you will have lost nothing but 48 hours. But if he says yes, you will have a choice, a real choice, not just picking between 2 bad options. Penelope wanted to say yes so badly it hurt. But reality came crashing back down, cold and unforgiving. Walter said the wedding is at the end of the month. That is less than 4 weeks away. Even if I ran, even if your employer gave me work, Walter would come looking for me. He has invested time and energy into this arrangement with my father. He will not just let me disappear. Let me worry about Walter Kemp, Samuel said, and there was steel in his voice that sent a shiver down Penelope's spine. I have dealt with men like him before, men who think money and position give them the right to treat others as property. They are bullies, and bullies back down when someone stands up to them. You have known me for less than an hour, Penelope said, but it was a weak protest. Why would you do this for me? Why would you risk your job, your savings, your future for a complete stranger? Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and earnest. My mother was in a situation like yours once. She was engaged to a man her father chose, a wealthy merchant who saw her as a trophy. She was miserable, trapped, but she did not think she had any other options. Then my father came along, just a simple ranch hand with nothing to his name but a good horse and a better heart. He told her she deserved more. He offered her a different life. She took a chance on him, and they had 25 years together before fever took them both 3 years ago. Those years were not easy, and they were not rich, but they were happy. They loved each other deeply, truly, until the very end. He paused, his eyes distant with memory, before focusing on her again. Before my mother died, she made me promise something. She made me promise that if I ever saw a woman in trouble, a woman trapped like she had been, I would help her. She made me swear I would not stand by and do nothing. So that is why I am doing this, Miss Owens, because I made a promise to my dying mother, and because you remind me of what she must have been like before my father gave her a choice. Strong and brave, even when you feel anything but. Tears were running freely down Penelope's face now, and she did not bother to wipe them away. I do not feel brave. Bravery is not the absence of fear, Samuel said gently. It is taking action despite the fear. You are standing here listening to a crazy stranger propose an impossible plan instead of running back to the safe, predictable misery of your arranged marriage. That takes courage. Penelope laughed, a watery sound that was half sob. Or desperation. Sometimes they are the same thing, Samuel said with a small grin that transformed his serious face into something warmer, more approachable. So, what do you say? Will you give me 2 days to ride north and talk to Mr. Patterson? Will you give yourself the possibility of a different future? Penelope closed her eyes, letting herself imagine it, leaving Ordway, leaving Walter, leaving the crushing weight of obligation and duty, working honestly for her own wages, being valued for her labor rather than her dowry or lack thereof. The possibility of friendship, maybe even more, with a man who had looked at her and seen someone worth saving. But she also thought of her father, worn and worried, counting on this marriage to save everything he had worked for. She thought of her mother's grave on the hillside overlooking their ranch, the land that had been in the Owens family for 2 generations. I need to talk to my father, she said finally, opening her eyes. I cannot just disappear without explaining. He deserves to know why I cannot go through with this marriage, even if it means losing everything. Samuel nodded slowly. All right, talk to him. But be careful. If Walter gets wind that you are having second thoughts, he might push to move the wedding up. Men like him do not like losing control of situations they think they have secured. I will be careful, Penelope promised. When will you leave for the double bar? First light tomorrow, Samuel said. I will be back the day after, before sunset. Can you hold Walter off until then? I will find a way, Penelope said, with more confidence than she felt. They had reached the edge of town again, and Penelope knew she needed to go home, face her father, somehow explain what she was thinking of doing. But she found herself reluctant to leave Samuel's presence, this stranger who had become her unlikely ally in the space of an hour. Thank you, she said quietly, for caring about what happens to me, for offering me a choice, even if nothing comes of it, even if I end up marrying Walter after all. Thank you for making me feel like I mattered, even for a little while. Samuel reached out and gently took her hand, his work-roughened fingers warm around hers. You matter, Penelope Owens. You matter a great deal. Do not ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. Then he released her hand, tipped his hat, and walked away, disappearing into the bustle of Ordway's main street. Penelope stood there for a long moment, her hands still tingling from his touch, her mind reeling with everything that had happened in such a short span of time. Finally, she turned and headed home, trying to figure out how to tell her father that she could not marry Walter Kemp, that there might be another way, that a cowboy named Samuel Hawkins had offered her a lifeline, and she was desperate enough to take it. The Owens ranch was modest, a small house with a barn and a few outbuildings, surrounded by grazing land that had seen better days. The grass was sparse, the fences needed mending, and the whole place had an air of genteel poverty that broke Penelope's heart every time she looked at it. This had been a thriving ranch once, when her mother was alive. Her mother had been the one with the head for business, the one who knew how to manage the books and negotiate prices. After she died, Penelope's father had tried his best, but ranching required more than hard work and good intentions. Penelope found her father in the barn, tending to their aging horse. He looked up when she entered, his weathered face lined with exhaustion and worry. "There you are," he said. "Walter was not happy that you walked off like that. You need to show him more respect, Penelope. He is going to be your husband." "Papa, we need to talk," Penelope said, her voice shaking despite her efforts to stay calm. Her father set down the brush he had been using on the horse and turned to face her fully. "If this is about what you overheard, you knew I was there?" Penelope interrupted, shocked. "I saw you standing outside the door," her father admitted. "I am sorry you had to hear that conversation, but you need to understand. Walter is a businessman. He is approaching this marriage the way he approaches all his dealings. It does not mean he will not treat you well." "He demanded money to marry me, Papa," Penelope said, her voice rising. "He said he wanted compensation for taking on me and my problems. He talked about me like I was a burden, a bad investment he needed to be paid to accept. How is that treating me well?" Her father sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 57 years. "I know it sounds harsh, but that is how the world works, Penelope. Marriage among people in our position is about practical matters. Love and affection are luxuries we cannot afford." "Mama loved you," Penelope said quietly. "You loved her. Was that a luxury?" Pain flashed across her father's face. "Your mother was an exceptional woman, and I was incredibly fortunate. But our situation was different. Her father approved of the match. We were not facing financial ruin. Do not compare what your mother and I had to what you and Walter will have. It is not fair to anyone." "I met someone today," Penelope blurted out, unable to keep it inside any longer. "A cowboy named Samuel Hawkins. He overheard Walter's conversation with you, and he told me that Walter does not deserve me. He offered to help me, Papa. He is going to ride to the Double Bar Ranch and talk to the owner about work for me, maybe even work for you. We could start over, both of us, without having to sell me to Walter Kemp." Her father's expression shifted from tired to angry. "You discussed our private family business with a stranger? Penelope, how could you be so foolish? Do you have any idea what kind of gossip that could start? What if Walter hears about this?" "I did not discuss anything." Penelope defended herself. "Samuel overheard the conversation on his own, and he was kind, Papa. He was kind when no one else has been. He saw that I was hurting, and he offered to help. Is that really so terrible?" "It is naive," her father said harshly. "A strange man offers you a way out, and you believe him? Penelope, you are smarter than this. This Samuel Hawkins probably saw a pretty young woman in distress and decided to take advantage. He is probably planning to ruin your reputation so that Walter will not marry you, leaving you with nothing and no prospects." "He is not like that," Penelope insisted, but doubt crept into her mind. Was her father right? Had she been so desperate to escape Walter that she had been fooled by a smooth-talking cowboy with kind eyes? "You do not know what he is like," her father said, more gently now. "You have known him for an hour. I have known Walter for 6 months. He may not be perfect, but he is respectable, wealthy, and willing to marry you despite our financial situation. Do you understand how rare that is? How lucky you are to have this opportunity?" "Lucky?" Penelope repeated flatly. "I am lucky to marry a man who demands to be paid to take me as his wife. I am lucky to tie myself to someone who sees me as a burden. That is your definition of luck?" "It is my definition of survival," her father said, his voice breaking. "Penelope, I am going to lose this ranch. The bank is going to foreclose in 8 weeks. Everything your mother and I built, everything we hope to leave you, will be gone. Walter's money is the only thing standing between us and complete ruin. I need this marriage to happen. I need you to do this for me, for your mother's memory, for everything we have worked for." The weight of his words pressed down on Penelope like a physical force. She looked around the barn, seeing her mother's old saddle hanging on the wall, remembering how her mother had taught her to ride in this very space. The memories were everywhere, woven into every board and beam of this place. Could she really be the reason her father lost it all? "What if Samuel comes back with a real offer?" she asked quietly. "What if the double bar has work for both of us? Would you at least consider it?" Her father was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "If this cowboy comes back with a legitimate offer of employment, paying enough to support us both and save this ranch from foreclosure, I will consider it. But Penelope, do not pin your hopes on this. Men like that make promises they cannot keep. In 2 days, when he does not return, we will move forward with the wedding plans. Agreed?" It was not really an agreement, but it was the best Penelope was going to get. She nodded, her throat too tight for words, and left the barn before her father could see her cry. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the room she had occupied since childhood, Penelope stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Was Samuel Hawkins a knight in shining armor, or a con man taking advantage of a desperate woman? Would he really come back with a job offer, or had he already forgotten about her, moved on to the next town, the next adventure? She touched her hand, the one he had held so briefly, and tried to recapture the feeling of safety and hope she had experienced in that moment. Whether or not Samuel came through, he had given her something precious, the belief, even if only for a moment, that she deserved better than Walter Kemp, that she mattered. She would hold on to that belief for the next 2 days, no matter what happened. The following day passed in agonizing slowness. Penelope went through her usual chores, cooking, cleaning, tending the small vegetable garden behind the house, but her mind was miles away, riding north with Samuel Hawkins. What was he saying to Mr. Patterson? Was the ranch owner sympathetic to her plight, or would he think Samuel was crazy for getting involved? Would there even be work available? Walter came by in the afternoon, bringing his mother to discuss wedding arrangements. Mrs. Kemp was a cold, pinched woman who looked at Penelope like she was a stray cat Walter had inexplicably decided to bring home. "The dress my cousin wore would suit you well enough," Mrs. Kemp said, running a critical eye over Penelope's figure. "We will need to take it in significantly, of course. You are rather thin." "I think Penelope would prefer to choose her own dress," Penelope's father said weakly, but Mrs. Kemp waved him off. "Nonsense. We are already being generous enough with this marriage. The least the girl can do is wear the family dress. It is tradition." Walter said nothing, just sat in the corner of their small parlor looking bored and superior. Penelope wondered if he would even notice if she was not at their wedding, or if he would just marry the dress and be satisfied. "I need more time," Penelope said suddenly, surprising herself. "To prepare. The end of the month is too soon." "Too soon for what?" Mrs. Kemp asked sharply. "To put on a dress and say a few words? Really, girl? You act as if this is some grand affair instead of a simple business arrangement." "Mother," Walter said, a warning in his tone. Then to Penelope, "What my mother means is that there is no reason to delay. All the necessary arrangements can be made within 3 weeks, unless you have some objection to marrying me." There was a challenge in his voice, and Penelope knew she was on dangerous ground. If she pushed too hard, Walter might back out of the deal entirely, and her father would lose his last chance to save the ranch. "No objection," she said quietly, hating herself for the lie. "I just wanted to be certain we had time to do things properly." "Properly, Mrs. Kemp snorted. "As if anything about this match is proper. My son could have married any number of suitable young ladies from good families. Instead, he is settling for a penniless ranch girl with no prospects and no connections. You should be grateful, Miss Owens, not making demands about timing." The words stung, but Penelope kept her expression neutral. Beside her, she felt her father flinch, his hands tightening on the arms of his chair. She wanted to defend herself, to tell Mrs. Kemp exactly what she could do with her family dress and her superior attitude, but she bit her tongue. Just 2 more days. She could endure this for 2 more days. After Walter and his mother finally left, Penelope's father sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, without looking at her, I am sorry that woman spoke to you that way. I am sorry I could not defend you properly without risking the arrangement. I am sorry for all of this. I know, Papa, Penelope said, and she did. She knew her father was doing what he thought was necessary. She knew he loved her, in his way, but she also knew that sometimes love was not enough to protect someone from hurt and hardship. The second day was worse than the first. Penelope jumped at every sound, hoping it was Samuel returning with news. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, she felt hope beginning to die. Her father had been right. Samuel had been a charming stranger with empty promises. He was not coming back. She was in the garden, angrily pulling weeds, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She looked up to see a rider coming down the road toward the ranch, and her heart leapt into her throat. Even from a distance she recognized the set of Samuel's shoulders, the way he sat his horse. He had come back. Penelope dropped her gardening tools and ran toward the front of the house, arriving just as Samuel dismounted. He looked tired, dusty from 2 days of hard riding, but his face split into a wide grin when he saw her. "You came," she breathed, hardly able to believe it. "I told you I would," Samuel said. "And I have news. Good news." Penelope's father emerged from the house, his expression wary. "You are the cowboy my daughter mentioned." "Samuel Hawkins, sir," Samuel said, extending his hand. This time, unlike with Walter, his gesture was met with a handshake. "I apologize for the unusual nature of this visit, but I believe I have a proposition that might interest you." "My daughter said you were going to find us work," Penelope's father said skeptically. "Forgive me, young man, but that seems far-fetched." "I thought so too, until I talked to my employer," Samuel said. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a letter from Mr. Jacob Patterson, owner of the Double Bar Ranch. He has formally offered Miss Owens a position as assistant to his wife, with room and board plus $30 a month. He has also offered you a position as a ranch hand, Mr. Owens, same terms. In addition, Mr. Patterson has agreed to lend you $1,000, interest-free for the first year, to settle your debts and save your ranch from foreclosure." Penelope stared at Samuel in shock. $1,000? "Mr. Patterson is a wealthy man, and more importantly, he is a good one," Samuel said. "His own daughter ran away from an arranged marriage 15 years ago. When I told him about your situation, Miss Owens, he saw his daughter's story all over again. He wants to help." "And what does he want in return?" Penelope's father asked, his voice hard with suspicion. "No one lends that kind of money without expecting something back." "He expects honest work," Samuel said. "He expects you to pay back the loan when you are able, though he is willing to be patient about the timeline. And he expects Miss Owens to be treated with respect and given the same opportunities as any other employee on his ranch. Those are his terms." Penelope's father took the letter, unfolding it with shaking hands. He read it slowly, carefully, then read it again. Penelope watched his face, seeing hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "This is real?" her father asked finally. "This is a genuine offer?" "Mr. Patterson is riding down tomorrow to meet with you personally and finalize the arrangements," Samuel said. "He wanted to be sure everything was legitimate and above board. He will bring his lawyer and the loan papers. All you have to do is say yes." "Papa," Penelope said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please." Her father looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the moment he understood. He saw what this meant to her, how desperately she wanted a way out of marrying Walter. He saw her hope and her fear, and something in his expression softened. "I need to think about this," he said finally. "This is not a decision to make lightly. We are talking about accepting charity from a stranger, breaking an engagement, potentially making an enemy of Walter Kemp and his family. These are serious consequences." "The consequences of marrying Walter are more serious," Penelope said urgently. "Papa, you heard how he talked about me, how his mother treats me. Do you really want that life for me? Do you really want to sell me to a man who has to be paid to take me?" Her father flinched at her words. "It is not that simple, Penelope." "Yes, it is," she insisted. "You can take Mr. Patterson's offer, save the ranch, and let me have a chance at a different life. Or you can force me to marry Walter and spend the rest of your days knowing you traded my happiness for land and water rights. Those are your choices, Papa. Which one can you live with?" The silence stretched out, painful and heavy. Samuel stood quietly, not interfering, letting this family drama play out as it needed to. Finally, Penelope's father spoke. "I will meet with Mr. Patterson tomorrow. I will hear what he has to say. But I am making no promises, Penelope. I need to be certain this is real, that we are not jumping from one bad situation into another." It was not the enthusiastic acceptance Penelope had hoped for, but it was not an outright refusal either. She would take it. "Thank you, Papa," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Her father nodded curtly and went back into the house, leaving Penelope and Samuel standing in the yard as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. "He will come around," Samuel said confidently. "Once he meets Mr. Patterson, once he sees the loan papers and understands this is legitimate, he will agree. How could he not?" "You do not know my father," Penelope said. "He is stubborn and proud. Taking money from a stranger, even as a loan, will be hard for him to swallow." "Then we will help him swallow it," Samuel said. He stepped closer, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. "I did not ride 2 days there and back, barely sleeping, just to give up now. You are going to get away from Walter Kemp, Penelope. I am going to make sure of it." "Why?" Penelope asked, the question that had been burning inside her since the moment they met. "Why do you care so much? You do not even know me." Samuel was quiet for a moment, studying her face as if trying to memorize every feature. When he spoke, his voice was low and honest. "I told you about my mother, about the promise I made to her. That is part of it, but it is not all of it. The truth is, from the moment I saw you outside that general store, looking heartbroken and lost, I felt something. A connection, a pull, whatever you want to call it. My father used to tell me that when he met my mother, he knew immediately that she was going to be important to him. He could not have said how or why, but he knew. I always thought he was exaggerating, that it was just a story he told to be romantic. But now I understand what he meant." Penelope's breath caught. "Samuel, I am not asking you for anything," Samuel said quickly. "I am not expecting you to fall in love with me or marry me or anything like that. I know we just met. I know this is all happening impossibly fast. I just need you to know that I am doing this because I want to, because I cannot imagine walking away and wondering for the rest of my life what happened to you. Whether you ended up trapped in a loveless marriage, whether you ever smiled again, whether you ever got the chance to be valued the way you deserve." Penelope felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude and hope, and something else, something she was afraid to name. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. "Then do not thank me," Samuel said with a gentle grin. "Just say you will come to the double bar. Say you will give yourself a chance at a different life. That is all the thanks I need." "If my father agrees," Penelope said, "if Mr. Patterson truly offers him this loan and he accepts it, then yes, I will come to the double bar. I will take the job and the fresh start, and I will forever be grateful to you for making it possible." Samuel's grin widened into something brilliant and joyful. "Then I will see you in a few days when you and your father come north. I better head back now before it gets too dark. Mr. Patterson will be here tomorrow around noon. Be ready for him." He mounted his horse in one smooth motion, then looked down at her with an expression so warm and full of promise that it made Penelope's heart race. "Everything is going to be all right, Penelope Owens," he said. "I promise you that." Then he rode off into the gathering dusk, leaving Penelope standing in her yard with hope blooming in her chest like wildflowers after rain. Mr. Jacob Patterson arrived precisely at noon the following day, riding in a fine carriage with his lawyer beside him. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair and a weathered but kind face. He greeted Penelope and her father with warmth and directness, wasting no time on small talk. "Mr. Hawkins told me about your situation," he said, sitting in the Owens' modest parlor. "Both your financial troubles and the unfortunate nature of your daughter's engagement. I have been where you are, Mr. Owens. My own daughter was engaged to a man who saw her as property. She ran away rather than marry him, and it nearly broke my heart. But in the end, it was the right decision. She found a good man who loved her for herself, and she has been happy. I want that chance for your daughter." Penelope's father listened carefully as Mr. Patterson outlined his offer. The loan, the jobs, the terms of repayment, all of it presented clearly and without any hidden catches. The lawyer produced papers documenting everything, all legally binding and straightforward. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Penelope's father asked, the same question everyone seemed to be asking. "Because I can," Mr. Patterson said simply. "Because I have been blessed with success, and I believe that success should be used to help others when possible. And because Samuel Hawkins is one of the best men I have ever employed. He has worked for me for 3 years, never missed a day, never caused trouble, always gone above and beyond. When he came to me with this request, I knew it mattered to him. That was enough for me." Penelope's father looked at the papers, at Mr. Patterson, at Penelope. She could see the internal struggle playing out across his face, pride versus practicality, stubbornness versus love for his daughter. "If I accept this," he said slowly, "I am breaking my agreement with Walter Kemp. He will not take that lightly. He has connections to the railroad, to the bank. He could make things difficult for me." "He could try," Mr. Patterson agreed, "but he would have to go through me first, and I assure you, I have significantly more connections and resources than Walter Kemp. Let me worry about any trouble he might cause." "Papa, please," Penelope said softly, "please let me have this chance." Her father looked at her, and she saw love and regret and acceptance in his eyes. "You are sure this is what you want? You would rather work as a housekeeper for strangers than marry into wealth and security?" "I would rather work honestly and maintain my dignity than sell myself to a man who does not value me," Penelope said firmly. "Yes, Papa, I am sure." Her father sighed deeply, then reached for the pen the lawyer offered him. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. Patterson, and I thank you for your generosity." As her father signed the papers, Penelope felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was free. She was truly, finally free from Walter Kemp and the future he represented. "There is one more matter to address," Mr. Patterson said. "Walter Kemp will need to be informed of the broken engagement. Mr. Owens, I would recommend you do that as soon as possible, perhaps today. Better to handle it quickly than let him hear about it through gossip." Penelope's father nodded grimly. "I will go into town this afternoon and speak with him." "I will accompany you," Mr. Patterson offered. "Sometimes these conversations go more smoothly with a neutral third party present." That afternoon, Penelope waited anxiously at home while her father and Mr. Patterson went to confront Walter. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, needing to keep her hands busy, needing to do something to combat the nervous energy coursing through her. They returned near sunset, her father looking exhausted but relieved. "It is done," he said. Walter was not happy, as you can imagine. He made several threats, most of them involving lawsuits and damaged reputations. But Mr. Patterson made it clear that any legal action would be met with swift and overwhelming response. Walter eventually accepted the situation, though I suspect he will spread unflattering rumors about us around town. "Let him," Penelope said, surprising herself with her vehemence. "Let him tell everyone that I refuse to marry him. I do not care what anyone thinks." "When can you be ready to travel north?" Mr. Patterson asked. "I would suggest sooner rather than later. Give the gossip time to die down while you are away." 2 days, Penelope said. "I can be packed and ready in 2 days." "Then I will send Samuel down to escort you," Mr. Patterson said. "The journey to the double bar takes about half a day on horseback. Samuel can help with your belongings and make sure you arrive safely." The next 2 days passed in a blur of packing and preparations. Penelope took only what she could carry: clothes, a few personal items, the small collection of books that had belonged to her mother. Everything else would be left behind or sold. On the morning of their departure, Penelope stood in the doorway of the only home she had ever known, looking at the rooms that held so many memories. Her father had decided to rent out the ranch rather than sell it, keeping the door open for possibly returning someday. Mr. Patterson had arranged for another rancher to manage the property in their absence. "Are you sad to leave?" her father asked, coming to stand beside her. "Yes," Penelope admitted. "But I am also excited. Scared, but excited. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," her father said. He put his arm around her shoulders, something he had not done since she was a child. "I am sorry I almost forced you to marry Walter. I was so focused on saving this place that I forgot what really matters. You mother would have been ashamed of me." "Mama would have understood," Penelope said gently. "You were trying to save her legacy. But I think she would agree that my happiness is more important than the land or buildings." Her father nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Your mother was a wise woman. I should have listened to her voice in my head more often." Samuel arrived mid-morning, leading 2 additional horses for transporting their belongings. He looked refreshed, cheerful, and unbearably handsome in the morning sunlight. When his eyes met Penelope's, his face lit up with a grin that made her stomach flutter. "Ready for your new adventure?" he asked. "As ready as I will ever be," Penelope replied. The journey north was beautiful, passing through prairie land dotted with wildflowers and occasional stands of cottonwood trees. Samuel rode beside Penelope, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the Double Bar Ranch, what to expect, who the other workers were. "Mrs. Patterson is wonderful," he said. "A bit stern at first, but warm once you get to know her. She lost a son in the war and a daughter to pneumonia, so their surviving daughter and 3 grandchildren mean everything to her. She talks about them constantly, fair warning." "I do not mind," Penelope said. "I like hearing about families." "There are about 20 ranch hands, including me," Samuel continued. "Most of them are decent fellows. A few are a bit rough around the edges, but harmless. Mrs. Patterson runs a strict household. No drinking, no gambling, no foul language around the women. Anyone who breaks the rules finds themselves unemployed very quickly." "And where will I be staying?" Penelope asked. "There is a bunkhouse for the female employees, separate from the men's bunkhouse. Right now, there are 3 other women, 2 who help Mrs. Patterson with cooking and housekeeping, and 1 who teaches the Patterson grandchildren. You will have your own room, small but private." Penelope tried to imagine this new life awaiting her, working alongside other women, having her own space, earning her own wages. It seemed almost too good to be true. They arrived at the Double Bar in the early afternoon. The ranch was impressive, sprawling across a lush valley with mountains visible in the distance. The main house was large and well-maintained, surrounded by various outbuildings, corrals, and pastures filled with cattle and horses. Mrs. Patterson met them at the main house, a tall woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her expression was stern, but her eyes were kind as she looked Penelope over. "So you are the girl my husband has been talking about," she said. "Running away from a bad engagement, I hear." "Yes, madam," Penelope said, lifting her chin. "I am grateful for the opportunity to work here." "We will see about that," Mrs. Patterson said, but there was a hint of approval in her voice. "Anyone willing to choose honest work over an easy marriage has my respect. Come inside. I will show you where you will be staying and explain your duties." Penelope glanced back at Samuel, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then she followed Mrs. Patterson into her new life. The first weeks at the Double Bar Ranch were the hardest Penelope had ever worked. Mrs. Patterson had not been joking about running a strict household. Penelope's days started before dawn and ended long after sunset. She cooked, cleaned, did laundry, tended the vegetable garden, and helped preserve food for the winter. It was exhausting, back-breaking work, but it was also satisfying in a way Penelope had never experienced before. She was earning her own money, making her own decisions, building friendships with the other women, and she was valued not for her dowry or her family connections or her potential as a business arrangement, but for the work she did and the person she was. Her father had been hired as a ranch hand and was working hard at learning the ropes. He was older than most of the other workers and not used to taking orders, but he was adapting. Penelope saw him at meals, and they would talk briefly about their days, building a new kind of relationship as independent adults rather than dependent father and daughter. And then there was Samuel. Samuel was everywhere and nowhere at once. Penelope would see him across the yard, working with the horses or repairing fences. They would cross paths at meals, exchange a few words, a quick smile. But they were both so busy with their own responsibilities that there was little time for real conversation. Yet Penelope found herself thinking about him constantly. She remembered the way he had looked at her outside the general store in Ordway, the conviction in his voice when he said Walter did not deserve her. She remembered his kindness, his determination to help her, the promise he had made to his dying mother that had led him to intervene in her life. She wondered if he thought about her too, or if she was just another person he had helped, a good deed done and forgotten. One evening, about 3 weeks after Penelope's arrival at the Double Bar, she was sitting outside the women's bunkhouse, enjoying a rare moment of rest. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and she was mending a tear in one of her work dresses. "You look peaceful," Samuel's voice came from behind her. Penelope looked up, her heart doing that familiar flutter it always did when she saw him. "I was thinking," she said, "about how different my life is now compared to a month ago." Samuel sat down beside her, not too close, but not too far either. "Different better or different worse?" "Better," Penelope said, without hesitation. "So much better. I work harder here than I ever did at home, and I am more tired at the end of each day than I ever thought possible. But I am happy. I am free. I am valued. All because you refuse to mind your own business outside a general store in Ordway." Samuel grinned, that warm, open expression that Penelope had come to treasure. "Best decision I ever made, not minding my own business." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower. Then Samuel said, his voice more serious, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you regret it? Leaving your home, breaking your engagement, all of it? Do you ever wish you had just married Walter and kept your old life?" "Not for a single second," Penelope said firmly. "Walter Kemp was going to break me, slowly and surely. Maybe not physically, but spiritually. He would have crushed everything that makes me who I am until I was just a hollow shell going through the motions of being his wife. Here, I get to be myself. I get to laugh with my friends, take pride in my work, make my own choices. That is worth more than all of Walter's money and connections combined." "I am glad," Samuel said softly. "I was worried sometimes that I had pushed you into something you were not ready for, that I had been too forward, too presumptuous." "You saved me," Penelope said, looking at him directly. "You saw someone in trouble, and you helped, even though you had nothing to gain from it, even though it cost you time and effort and put you in an awkward position with your employer. You are a good man, Samuel Hawkins, maybe the best man I have ever met." Samuel's blue eyes were intense in the fading light. "Penelope, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right time, the right words, but I am not sure there is a right time or right words for what I want to say." Penelope's sewing fell forgotten to her lap. "What is it?" "That day in Ordway, when I told you that you deserved better than Walter, I was not just making a general statement. I meant you deserve the very best. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are and loves every part of that person. Someone who would cross deserts and mountains just to make you smile. Someone who thinks about you constantly and cannot imagine a future that does not include you." Penelope's breath caught. "Samuel, I am falling in love with you," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "Maybe I started falling that first day. Maybe it was when I saw you adapt to life here so gracefully, never complaining even when I know you must have been exhausted. Maybe it happened gradually, through 100 small moments of watching you laugh with your friends, or seeing you be kind to the animals, or noticing the way you always make sure everyone else is served before you take your own meal. I do not know exactly when it happened, but I know it is true. I love you, Penelope. And I know it has only been a few weeks, and I know I have no right to burden you with my feelings when you have just escaped one unwanted engagement, but I could not keep it inside any longer." Penelope stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Part of her wanted to be cautious, to protect herself, to point out all the reasonable objections to falling in love so quickly with someone she barely knew. But another part of her, a deeper, wiser part, recognized the truth in what Samuel was saying, because she had been falling too. Through the long days of hard work, through the brief moments of seeing him across the yard, through the memory of his kindness and his strength, and his unwavering belief that she deserved better. "I love you too," she said, the words tumbling out before she could overthink them. "I have been trying to talk myself out of it, telling myself it is too soon, that I barely know you, that I should be cautious after everything with Walter. But the truth is, I feel more certain about my feelings for you after a month than I ever felt about Walter after 6 months of courtship. You make me want to be braver, stronger, more myself. When I am with you, I feel like anything is possible." Samuel's face transformed with joy. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, and Penelope felt warmth spreading through her entire body from that simple touch. "I want to court you properly," Samuel said. "I want to take you on walks and bring you flowers and learn everything about you. I want to earn your trust and your love in the way you deserve, not rush you into anything because of what you just escaped." "I would like that," Penelope said softly. "I would like that very much." They sat together as darkness fell, hands intertwined, talking quietly about their hopes and dreams and fears. Penelope learned that Samuel wanted to own his own ranch someday, to build something lasting that he could be proud of. Samuel learned that Penelope had always dreamed of opening a school for children in rural areas who could not access education otherwise. They talked about their childhoods, their favorite memories, the things that made them laugh, and the things that made them cry. It was the beginning of something beautiful. Over the following months, Samuel courted Penelope with a gentleness and sincerity that made her fall more deeply in love with him every day. He brought her wildflowers he picked on his rides around the ranch. He carved her a beautiful wooden box to store her mother's jewelry. He took her on walks in the evening after their work was done, showing her his favorite spots on the ranch, a hidden creek where willows grew, a hilltop with a view of the mountains, a meadow where elk sometimes grazed. Mrs. Patterson watched their growing relationship with approval, occasionally inviting them both to dinner at the main house and chaperoning their outings with a knowing smile. "He is a good man," Mrs. Patterson told Penelope one day as they were kneading bread together. "My husband has always said Samuel was special. He works hard, treats everyone with respect, never causes trouble. You could do far worse." "I could not do better," Penelope said honestly. "Then hold on to him," Mrs. A. Patterson advised. "Good men are rare. When you find one, you fight to keep him." Penelope's father noticed the relationship developing as well. One evening, he pulled Samuel aside and had a conversation that Samuel later reported to Penelope with some amusement. "Your father threatened to string me up if I hurt you," Samuel said, his eyes twinkling. "He said he had made one mistake by almost forcing you to marry the wrong man, and he would not stand by and watch another man break your heart. I assured him my intentions were completely honorable." "And what are your intentions?" Penelope asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. "To marry you," Samuel said simply. "If you will have me. I know we agreed to take things slowly, but, Penelope, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to spend the rest of my days with you. I want to build a life together, have a family, grow old watching sunsets from our own porch. I want everything with you." "I want that too," Penelope whispered. "But I do not have a dowry. I cannot bring anything to a marriage except myself and my wages." "You bring everything that matters," Samuel said fiercely. "Your strength, your kindness, your courage, your love. That is worth more than all the land and money in the world. Penelope Owens, will you marry me?" Penelope did not hesitate. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." They were married in late September of 1883, 6 months after that fateful day outside the general store in Ordway. The wedding was held at the Double Bar Ranch with all the ranch hands and staff in attendance. Mr. Patterson walked Penelope down the aisle since her father was standing up as Samuel's best man. Mrs. Patterson cried throughout the entire ceremony. Penelope wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself with help from her friends. Samuel wore his best clothes, his dark hair carefully combed, his blue eyes shining with love and joy as he watched his bride approach. The ceremony was short and sweet, conducted by a traveling preacher who passed through the area once a month. When Samuel kissed Penelope as his wife for the first time, cheers erupted from the assembled guests. The celebration afterward was joyful and rowdy, with music and dancing and more food than Penelope had seen in months. Samuel danced with her until her feet ached, his arms around her, his voice in her ear telling her how beautiful she was, how happy he was, how he could not wait to start their life together. That night, in the small cabin Mr. Patterson had given them as a wedding gift, Samuel carried Penelope over the threshold and set her down gently. The cabin was modest but cozy, with one main room that served as living space and kitchen, and a smaller bedroom in the back. "Our home," Samuel said, looking around with satisfaction. "The first of many we will share." "It is perfect," Penelope said, meaning it. She did not need a grand house or expensive furnishings. She needed only Samuel, his love, his partnership, his presence. That night, they became husband and wife in every sense, and Penelope discovered that intimacy built on love and trust and mutual respect was a beautiful, precious thing. Samuel was gentle and patient, always checking to make sure she was comfortable, always putting her needs before his own. When they finally fell asleep in each other's arms as the moon rose outside their window, Penelope felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. "What are you thinking?" Samuel murmured, half asleep. "I am thinking about how different my life would be if you had not been outside that general store 6 months ago," Penelope said. "I would be Mrs. Walter Kemp, living in a loveless marriage, dying a little more inside every day. Instead, I am Mrs. Samuel Hawkins, married to the man I love, with a whole future full of possibilities ahead of me. It feels like a miracle." "Not a miracle," Samuel said, pulling her closer. "Just two people who recognized something worth fighting for and were brave enough to take a chance. You were brave, Penelope. You chose freedom over security, uncertainty over the familiar. That took incredible courage." "You gave me the courage," Penelope said. "You believed in me when I did not believe in myself." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other and in dreams of the future they would build together. The first year of their marriage was not easy, but it was happy. They both continued to work at the Double Bar, saving every penny they could toward Samuel's dream of buying his own ranch. They lived frugally, taking joy in simple pleasures, evening walks, shared meals, quiet conversations by the fire. Penelope discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1884, almost exactly a year after meeting Samuel. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had helped raise her younger cousins and knew the basics of caring for children, but the reality of bringing a new life into the world felt overwhelming. Samuel, predictably, was ecstatic. He started building a cradle immediately, spending his evenings carving and sanding the wood until it was smooth and perfect. He talked to Penelope's belly, telling their unborn child about the ranch they would someday own, the horses they would raise, the life they would build. "What if I am not a good mother?" Penelope asked one night, her hands resting on her growing stomach. "What if I do not know what to do?" "Then you will figure it out," Samuel said confidently. "The same way you figured out how to work at the Double Bar, how to build a life here, how to be brave when everything seemed impossible. You are the strongest person I know, Penelope. You are going to be an amazing mother." Mrs. Patterson was equally supportive, giving Penelope advice and hand-me-down baby clothes from her own children. She insisted Penelope reduce her workload as the pregnancy progressed, taking on more of the lighter tasks and leaving the heavy work to others. Penelope's father was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. He had adapted well to life at the Double Bar, and the hard work had been good for him. He looked healthier and happier than he had in years. "Your mother would have loved this," he told Penelope, touching her belly gently. "She always wanted grandchildren. I wish she could have been here to meet this little one." "She will be here in spirit," Penelope said, "and I will tell our children all about their grandmother, about how strong and wise and loving she was." Samuel and Penelope's son was born on a cold December night in 1884, with Mrs. Patterson and a midwife attending the birth. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Penelope was certain she could not go on. But Samuel was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her she was doing wonderfully, that he loved her, that she could do this. When their son finally entered the world, red-faced and squalling, Samuel cried openly. "He is perfect," he kept saying over and over. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him James, after Samuel's father. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. From the moment he was born, he was loved beyond measure. Those early months of parenthood were exhausting. James was a fussy baby who did not sleep well, and Penelope spent many nights walking the floor with him, singing lullabies her mother had once sung to her. But even in the exhaustion, there was joy. Samuel was a devoted father, taking his turn with nighttime feedings and diaper changes, never complaining about lost sleep or interrupted plans. "I do not know what I would do without you," Penelope told him one morning as they both stumbled around the cabin, bleary-eyed and exhausted. "I could not do this alone." "Good thing you will never have to," Samuel said, kissing her forehead. "We are partners, remember? In everything." As James grew from infant to toddler, Samuel and Penelope continued saving money, watching their dream of owning their own ranch slowly become more achievable. Mr. Patterson, impressed with their work ethic and dedication, gave them both raises and allowed them to keep living in their cabin rent-free. "You two remind me of myself and Mrs. Patterson when we were young," he told them. "Working hard, saving every penny, dreaming big. That is how you build something lasting." In the spring of 1886, an opportunity presented itself. A small ranch about 15 miles from the Double Bar went up for sale. The owner had died, and his children, who lived back east, wanted to sell quickly. The property was modest 200 acres, a small house that needed repairs, a barn, and a few outbuildings. But it had good water and decent grazing land, and the price was reasonable. Samuel and Penelope went to look at it on a warm May afternoon, bringing 2-year-old James with them. As they walked the property, Samuel's eyes lit up with possibilities. "We could do this," he said, his voice full of excitement. "We have enough saved for a down payment. We would have to take out a loan for the rest, but we could make it work. We could make this place thrive." "It would be a lot of work," Penelope said, but she was already imagining it fixing up the house, planting a garden, raising their children here. "The best things always are," Samuel said. He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "What do you think? Should we take the leap?" Penelope looked around at the land, their potential land. She thought about everything they had been through to get to this moment. The horrible day in Ordway when she had overheard Walter demanding payment to marry her. The incredible kindness of a stranger who refused to let her be treated as property. The courage it had taken to break her engagement and leave everything familiar behind. The joy she had found in honest work and true love. The son they had created together, who was even now toddling around exploring the grass and wildflowers. "Yes," she said firmly, "let us take the leap." They bought the ranch in June of 1886, signing papers and taking on debt that terrified them both. But they were young and strong and determined, and they had each other. That first summer was brutal long days of repair work, of building and fixing and improving. They hired a few hands to help with the heavy labor. And Penelope's father came to work for them, finally working his own family's land again, in a sense. By fall, they had the ranch running smoothly. They had cattle and horses, chickens, and a vegetable garden. The house was still small and simple, but it was clean and comfortable, and theirs. Above the front door, Samuel hung a sign he had carved. "Hawkins Ranch established 1886. Penelope stood looking at that sign on the day they moved in, James on her hip, and felt a sense of accomplishment and rightness so profound it took her breath away. "We did it," she whispered to Samuel. "We actually did it." "We did," Samuel agreed, wrapping his arms around both his wife and son. "And this is just the beginning." He was right. Over the next years, the Hawkins Ranch grew and prospered. Samuel had a talent for breeding horses, and his animals became known throughout the territory for their quality and temperament. Penelope managed the business side, keeping the books and negotiating sales with a skill that would have surprised her younger self. They had 3 more children, a daughter named Mary, born in 1888, another son named Thomas in 1890, and a second daughter named Catherine in 1893. The house got crowded and loud, but it was always full of love and laughter. Penelope's father lived with them, helping with the ranch work until his health began to fail in the mid-1890s. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1896, surrounded by his daughter, his son-in-law, and his 4 grandchildren. His last words were to tell Penelope how proud he was of her, how sorry he was for almost forcing her to marry Walter, how grateful he was that Samuel had come into their lives. By the turn of the century, the Hawkins Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the area. Samuel and Penelope were respected in their community, known for their fair dealing and generous spirits. They employed several workers and treated them well, remembering their own days as ranch hands. Penelope finally fulfilled her dream of opening a school, converting one of the ranch buildings into a classroom, and teaching the children of ranch families in the area. She was a natural teacher, patient and encouraging, and her students thrived under her instruction. On a warm evening in the summer of 1900, 17 years after their wedding, Samuel and Penelope sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching the sunset. Their children were grown. Now James was 15 and already showing signs of being a talented horseman like his father. Mary was 12 and wanted to be a teacher like her mother. Thomas was 10 and loved working with cattle. Catherine, the baby at 7, was fearless and adventurous, always getting into some mischief or another. "Do you ever think about that day in Ordway?" Penelope asked, her hand in Samuel's. "When you heard Walter demanding payment to marry me?" "Sometimes," Samuel admitted. "I think about what would have happened if I had not been there, or if I had minded my own business and walked away. It terrifies me, Penelope. The thought of you trapped in that marriage, unhappy and undervalued, the thought of never meeting you, never falling in love with you, never building this life together." "But you were there," Penelope said, "and you did not walk away. You saw someone in trouble and you helped, even though it cost you, even though it would have been easier to stay out of it. That is who you are, Samuel. That is why I fell in love with you." "Best decision I ever made," Samuel said, echoing his words from so many years ago. "Not minding my own business." Penelope laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "I am so grateful you did not. I am grateful for every moment of every day we have had together. The hard times and the easy times, the struggles and the triumphs, all of it. I would not change a single thing." "Not even Walter demanding payment up front?" Samuel teased. "That seems like something worth changing." "Not even that," Penelope said seriously. "Because that moment, as horrible as it was, led directly to you telling me he did not deserve me. It led to you offering me a choice I did not know I had. It led to all of this." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them, at the life they had built. "So no, I would not change it. Every difficult moment was necessary to bring us here." Samuel pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love you, Mrs. Hawkins. I have loved you since the moment I saw you outside that general store, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Penelope said, "my rescuer, my partner, nay, my best friend, the father of my children, the love of my life. Thank you for not deserving me, be treated as less than I was worth. Thank you for giving me a choice. Thank you for loving me." They sat together as darkness fell, comfortable in the silence, secure in their love. Inside the house, they could hear their children laughing and arguing and just being children. The ranch around them was quiet and peaceful, the product of years of hard work and dedication. Penelope thought about the girl she had been 17 years ago, scared, trapped, convinced she had no options but to marry a man who saw her as a burden. That girl had been so close to giving up, to accepting a fate that would have broken her spirit. But then a cowboy with blue eyes and a kind heart had stepped in. He had heard her betrothed demanding payment up front, and he had told her, with absolute conviction, "He does not deserve you." Those 5 words had changed everything. They had given her permission to want more, to expect better, to believe that her happiness mattered. They had been the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life. As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Penelope's love only deepened. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and market fluctuations. They celebrated their children's milestones, James's wedding in 1905 to a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, Mary's acceptance to a teaching college, Thomas's decision to stay on the ranch and work alongside his father, Catherine's fierce determination to become a veterinarian. In 1908, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together family and friends from across the territory. Penelope wore a new dress for the occasion, and Samuel gave her a beautiful necklace he had been saving for months to buy. 25 years, Samuel marveled as they danced together, surrounded by well-wishers. "It does not feel possible. It feels like just yesterday I was carrying you over the threshold of that little cabin at the double bar." "We were so young," Penelope said, smiling at the memory. "So naive about how hard it would be, but also so certain we could make it work." "We were right to be certain," Samuel said. "We have built something beautiful, you and I. Not just this ranch, but our family, our life together. I am so proud of everything we have accomplished." "I could not have done any of it without you," Penelope said. "You have been my rock, my support, my partner in every way that matters." Among the guests at the party were several people from Ordway, including the owner of the general store, where Samuel had first overheard Walter's horrible conversation. The man shook Samuel's hand and said, "I remember the day you two met, you know. I saw you talking to this pretty young lady and thought to myself, that cowboy has fallen hard. Looks like I was right." "You were," Samuel agreed, looking at Penelope with undisguised love. I fell hard and fast, and I have never regretted it for a moment. They heard, through the grapevine, that Walter Kemp had eventually married a woman from Denver, a business arrangement much like the one he had tried to make with Penelope's father. The marriage had been contentious and had ended in a bitter divorce after only 3 years. Walter had lost much of his fortune in bad investments and was now living a much reduced life back east somewhere. Penelope felt only pity when she heard this news. She bore Walter no ill will. He had been a product of his upbringing and his time, a man who saw marriages as business transactions and women as commodities. She was simply grateful she had escaped becoming his wife, grateful for the cowboy who had given her another option. As they entered their 50s, Samuel and Penelope began to slow down, letting their children take on more of the ranch management. They had become grandparents several times over, and there was nothing they loved more than spending time with their grandchildren, telling them stories of the old days and passing on the lessons they had learned. One of their favorite stories to tell was, of course, the story of how they met. The grandchildren never tired of hearing about Grandpa Samuel stepping in to save Grandma Penelope from a terrible marriage, about Grandpa riding for 2 days to get help, about how Grandma chose freedom over security. "What happened to the bad man Grandma was supposed to marry?" one of the grandchildren asked during one telling of the story. "He lived his life elsewhere," Penelope said diplomatically. "But more importantly, what happened was that your grandfather gave me a choice, and I chose love and partnership and freedom. And that choice led to your parents and to all of you. So even though parts of the story are sad, the ending is very, very happy." "The best ending," Samuel added, pulling Penelope close, "because I got to spend my life with the most amazing woman I have ever known." In the spring of 1920, Samuel and Penelope celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary. They were in their 60s now, gray-haired and slower moving, but still deeply in love. They sat on their porch, a ritual they had maintained for decades, watching another sunset paint the Colorado sky in brilliant colors. "Do you remember what you said to me the day after we got married?" Penelope asked. "You said our home was the first of many we would share." "I remember," Samuel said. "This is the only house we have ever needed," Penelope said, looking around at the home they had built and improved over the decades. "This house, this ranch, this life. It has been more than enough. It has been everything." "Because we built it together," Samuel said. "Because every board and nail, every decision and sacrifice was made with love and partnership. That is what makes a house a home, Penelope. Not the size or the grandeur, but the love within its walls." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the day fade into night. Around them, the ranch hummed with quiet activity, cattle settling for the evening, horses moving in the corrals, the distant sound of their son and grandchildren finishing the day's work. Penelope thought about the scared 21-year-old girl she had been, standing outside a general store in Ordway, hearing the man she was supposed to marry negotiate her price like she was livestock. She thought about the anger and despair she had felt, the crushing weight of obligation and duty, and then she thought about the cowboy who had refused to let that be her story, the stranger who had seen her pain and decided to help, who had ridden for days to give her an option, who had fallen in love with her and built a life with her that exceeded her wildest dreams. "I would do it all again," she said suddenly. "Every hard moment, every difficult choice, every challenge we faced. I would do it all exactly the same way because it led to this, to us, to our family and our home and our life together." "So would I," Samuel said, his voice full of emotion. "Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life, Penelope Hawkins. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two people who had chosen each other against all odds and had spent nearly 4 decades proving that choice right. They had built a life based on respect and partnership and genuine love, and that foundation had allowed them to weather every storm. Later that night, lying in bed together, Penelope curled into Samuel's embrace, listening to his steady heartbeat, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. She was grateful for every moment they had been given, every sunrise and sunset, every laugh and tear, every ordinary day that had made up their extraordinary life together. "He was right, you know," Samuel murmured into the darkness. "Who was right?" Penelope asked sleepily. "Walter? He did not deserve you. No one could possibly deserve you. but I have spent every day of the last 37 years trying to be worthy of your love, and I will spend whatever days I have left doing the same." Penelope felt tears slip down her cheeks, happy tears, grateful tears. "You have always been worthy, Samuel. From the very first moment, you have been exactly the man I needed, the man I was meant to be with. I love you with everything I am." "And I love you," Samuel whispered, "today, tomorrow, and always." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other and in the life they had built together, a life that had started with a terrible moment outside a general store, a life that had been transformed by a cowboy's kindness and a young woman's courage, a life that had become more beautiful and meaningful than either of them could have imagined. Samuel and Penelope Hawkins lived well into their 80s, watching their ranch pass to their children and grandchildren, watching their family grow and flourish. They were never wealthy in monetary terms, but they were rich in the things that mattered: love, family, community, purpose. When Samuel finally passed away in his sleep in 1928, at the age of 85, Penelope mourned deeply, but not despairingly. They had been given 45 years together, years full of love and partnership and joy. She had no regrets, no what-ifs, no wishes for things to have been different. At Samuel's funeral, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Penelope stood and told the story one more time, the story of how they met, how a cowboy had heard her betrothed demanding payment up front and had told her, with conviction and kindness, "He does not deserve you." "Those words changed my life," Penelope told the assembled crowd, her voice still strong despite her 86 years. "They gave me permission to want more, to expect better, to believe I was worth fighting for. And Samuel spent the next 45 years proving to me, every single day, that I was valued and loved and cherished. He was the best man I ever knew, and I was blessed beyond measure to spend my life with him." Penelope lived for 3 more years after Samuel's death, staying on at the ranch, still teaching occasionally, still tending her beloved garden. She died peacefully in 1931, surrounded by family, her last words a whisper of Samuel's name. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky as wide and blue as the one that had witnessed their first meeting. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription chosen by their children: "Partners in all things, bound by love, strengthened by respect, united for eternity." The Hawkins Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a living legacy to 2 people who had refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on them. The story of how Samuel and Penelope met became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that love can spring from the most unexpected moments, that courage can change the course of a life, and that choosing partnership and respect over convenience and security will always lead to the happiest endings. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, a cowboy with blue eyes and a woman with unstoppable courage sit together, holding hands, watching over the family they created and the love story they lived. A love story that started with 5 simple words that changed everything. He does not deserve you.